Do you know why? This
No, that can stay like that. It's
right,
good.
but I'm saying it used to be that you could have it out a little further and it would still work. What makes
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
Do you
I'm
know
gonna.
what makes it?
Yeah,
You could fix that.
yeah. I will fix it. But
Okay.
now that can stay like that.
Right, but you'll fix it?
Yeah, I
Because
will.
usually we put like some tapes, and also I want to sometimes give him a cup
Yeah,
of coffee.
it's a piece of food that
Oh, that
broke.
broke off. But you
Yeah,
could fix it?
yeah. I will do that.
Okay, great.
It's good, Sam. You know, it's good. Yes, one, two, one, two. Yes, it's good.
Good morning. Everybody can hear? In the back, you can hear? Are we good? Ladies in the back, you can hear me clearly? Okay, Junior, we're good? Record? You pressed record? Perfect, thank you. If I could just ask of you to please put your cell phones on vibrate, we would appreciate it very much. If you could do it in the beginning of the class, please. Thank you. there are three words in Parshas Kedoshim that seem quite straightforward and simple, and yet contain an extraordinary message and perspective on life that I wish to address with you today. The pasuk says, the verse says in Leviticus 19:15, Vayikra Yutes Tesvav, Perik Yutes pasuk Tesvav, Parshas Kedoshim, B'tzedek Tishboit Amisecha. Translated, literally, with justice shall you judge your friend, your fellow human being. The meaning of these words, is explained by the sages, by the Chazal, to contain two interpretations. The Gemara, the Talmud in Maseches Shvuos, Daf Lamed, Tractate Shvuos, page 30, gives two different interpretations to these words. One is, it's a message addressed to judges, to people who are in positions who have to judge. Leaders of courts, judges, dayanim, shoftim, etc. But tzedek tishbet hamisecha is an injunction to judge people with justice. And that includes not just not to corrupt the law, which the Torah warns against in other places, but it includes even subtleties. As the Gemara explains, don't have one person, two people come to court. You have the litigant, you have the defendant, you have the toiveya, you have the nitba, the one who is demanding, the one who is being accused. Don't allow one person to stand and one person to sit. Don't greet one person warmly and the other person coldly. Don't allow one person to give a long presentation and the other one you say we're in a rush. Make it fast. All of these types of behaviors, even though you don't see any explicit corruption, he's sitting, he's standing. But what it does is, it creates an atmosphere where there's a lack, an absence of complete balance and equality. And it undermines the law of B'tzedek Tishbeit HaMisech. When two people come for judgment, you must employ the highest levels of justice, tzedek, righteousness, what we would call fairness, complete fairness between two sides. One has a reputation. It's always that way, right? One guy has a reputation, and the other one is the saint of the generation, the saint of Muncie. But the moment you fall into that trap, you're not eligible to judge people with fairness. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation, says the Gemara, is that this verse is an injunction to every person. Not just to judges who have to make decisions and arbitrate, but to every single human being. And uses the famous expression, which is also found in Pirkei Avos, B'tzedek tishbet hamisecha means, Havei done es chavercha lekavschos. Judge your friend righteously. We're always judging people because we're always interacting with people. We judge them consciously and unconsciously. We judge them explicitly, and we judge them intuitively. We judge them in very premeditated ways, and we just judge them off with instinct, instantaneously. But we're always forming opinions and verdicts about people. Right? Even if you're sitting at a shiur, the person sitting near you, you're forming opinions about them, especially if they're there every single week. You already have probably quite developed opinions. You could say hi now to the person near you. And so the Gemara says, Havei done as chavercha lekavschos. Judge this person b'tzedek, meritoriously. What we would say, we would call it, and give them the benefit of the doubt, judge them in a positive, b'tzedek, with justice, with righteousness, from the word tzedek and tzedak. Rashi, on Chumash, quotes both interpretations, meaning both lend themselves, both are included in the literal meaning of the words. Rashi's focus is always the pshat, the literal interpretation. So on the words, B'tzedek tishpat ha'mesecha, Rashi says, Kimashmoi. The first meaning is the literal meaning. Judge people with justice. That's when you're judging people. Davar acher. Another interpretation is, Hevedanes chavercha lekavschus. Judge your fellow human being, judge your friend, your colleague, your relative, the person near you, physically or conceptually, lekavschus, in a meritorious fashion. Now the first interpretation is quite clear what it means. That the judge, more than anybody else, must be scrupulous in how fair and just and appropriate and moral and ethical he behaves in the courtroom and in the entire relationship with both parties, or as many parties as he's dealing with, throughout the entire case. When it comes to the second interpretation, it's a little more ambiguous. What does this mean, to judge people meritoriously? What does it practically mean in a person's life? Why does the Torah say b'tzedek tishpat ha'mesecha? What is the reason? Does the person deserve it? Is it just a nice thing to do? Is it about you? Is it about them? First, I want to address the benefits of it. The benefits. Besides it being a mitzvah, it also has three tremendous benefits. One is internally, the effect on people psychologically. When you see somebody doing something or somebody saying something, and you give them the benefit of the doubt, meaning they are really innocent and they're trying to do the best they can and they're doing things the way they know how to do them using the tools they have, intellectual, emotional, and social. What that does is you usually become a less frustrated person. There are people who are always annoyed with other people. They're always complaining about other people. They're genuinely annoyed. They're genuinely frustrated. They snap. They're upset. How could she say this? How can he say this? How can they do this? It's unbelievable. It's unfathomable. Where were they educated? They're not human. They don't live on this planet. How do people act this way? People who come home from weddings, from bar mitzvahs, from sheva brachas, and from bris, and from shul, from davening, from the office, from the workplace, from the supermarket, and they really put into bad moods because there's always somebody and something to complain about. When you learn to judge people meritoriously, meaning you may see it differently, you may know better. This person really thinks they're innocent. They really think they're doing the right thing, maybe because of ignorance, maybe because of lack of wisdom, maybe because of lack of experience, maybe because of lack of tools, maybe because of their own story. Whatever it is, you are not, as a result, in a much calmer place emotionally. Number one. Number two, there's a second benefit. When I judge people positively, I can actually repair the situation much more effectively. Meaning, if you're really bothered by somebody's behavior or by what somebody said to you or to somebody else, and you're really bothered, what do you think is the most effective way to eliminate the damage or to eliminate behavior that is similar to this? If you judge them positively or you judge them negatively. Think about yourself. If somebody comes over to you and says, you know, you're such a good person. You're such a kind person. I really appreciate X, Y, Z about you. Do you mind if I mention something? Most people, if they're healthy and functional, will say sure, even if you don't mean it. But you'll say sure, right? It's always nicer to hear a compliment. And then when they say, you know, I think you told this and this to somebody, and they may have been insulted, I think maybe it would be nice to call them up or send them an email or try to make amends. Or you did so and so, or you invited this one, or you didn't invite this one, or you made such a comment. It's much more likely that the person will listen to it and absorb it. What happens if somebody comes over to you and says, you know, I always knew you were a witch. I always knew you were a machshefa. In fact, you should go into the Guinness Book of World Records as the greatest one of the century. And just to prove it, look what you did yesterday Shabbos by your own simcha or by my simcha. What will happen in most cases? You will completely dismiss the person, either by just walking away and getting even more upset that now you have what to harbor for the next 10 and a half years, or you may even tell them. You may even become extremely defensive, critical of them, or very defensive of you. But one thing is for sure, it's very difficult to internalize their words. So that means strategically, if you are really bothered by somebody's behavior, what is the best way to react? By judging them favorably. So it's an interesting thing. Most people don't always realize this. Your passions have been stirred. Your heart is simmering. You're beyond yourself. You're upset. Your emotions are all over the place. Anybody relates? Your emotions are all over the place. You can't believe that your husband said this. You can't believe that your sister-in-law said this. You can't believe your mother-in-law said this. You can't believe your employer said this. Your employee said this. Your brother said this. Your shvige, I said already shvige, but that could be twice maybe. Your niece, your nephew, whatever it is, your father, your mother, your relative, your friend, your colleague, the person near you. You can't believe it. You're aghast. You're aghast. You would never do such a thing. If you actually care, and you actually are seeking repair, tikkun, the best, most effective strategy is give them the benefit of the doubt. Because then your approach to them will be far more subtle, refined, and respectful, and most people will then be able to accept it. Some people can't accept it ever, but most people will be able to accept it. You know, I get a lot of feedback. In my work, I get a lot of feedback. And Jews are not always complimentary. Not always. Yeah, I don't know where you live, but in my neck of the woods, they're not always complimentary. They're sometimes critical. Sometimes. Yeah. And I see it within myself. Sometimes a person will write me an email or come over to me and be extremely harsh and accusatory. And will say, you know, what you're doing is horrible. And I'm not even going to elaborate on different nice things that I've heard from people. And by the way, look what you did again. Look what you said again. I have to work on it, but my instinct is I can't take this person seriously. But if a person, on the other hand, gives me or anybody the benefit of the doubt, even if I made a mistake, or a genuine mistake, even a serious mistake, it's much easier emotionally. Our psyche doesn't have to put on a bulletproof vest because the person is not shooting. It's really when somebody comes with a gun shooting at you, and let's face it, the tongue, as the Navi says, Yirmiyah says, could be a chetz, could be an arrow. If the person is shooting arrows, I got to put on a shield. Once I lift up that shield, nothing is coming in. Even if the person is saying something beneficial and productive, it's not passing. But if the person is not shooting bullets, if the person actually is expressing concern with empathy, with affection, with sensitivity, with respect, even if there's a disagreement, it's much easier for me to hear another side and therefore actually correct it. That's a second tremendous benefit of judging people favorably rather than negatively. And then there's a third component, which is spiritual, metaphysical. So the first one is, it's simply a calmer life. People who don't think the whole world is evil and everybody besides them is meshuggah and narcissistic, live a happier, calmer life. When we realize people have different perspectives, different experiences, different ways they behave, everybody is just doing things with the tools that they were given. I have my tools, you have your tools. You don't have my tools, I don't have your tools. I live a calmer life. You live a much calmer life, a more serene life, especially families and in tight-knit communities. People don't see things the same way. We wear different glasses with different prescriptions, not just physically, but even more mentally and emotionally. Number two, if I actually want to fix it, it will be much more effective if I give you the benefit of the doubt instead of feeling that you are a maliciously bad person. If I think you're a bad person, the way I speak to you will usually distance you and no positivity will come out of it, usually. But there's a third component, and this has to do with a very powerful and moving interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, who once said as follows. It says in Pirkei Avos, Nifrayin min ha'adam midaitoi v'shaloi midaitoi. Heaven exacts payment from a person consciously and unconsciously. What does that mean? So he explained it by prefacing another Mishnah. The Mishnah says a person should always see three things. Histakel b'shloisha dvarim, this week's Perek. And the three things are Dame ayin basa, know where you're coming from, know where you're going, and know before whom you are destined to give a din and a cheshbon. And this is a very famous expression that took root in the Jewish language of Lashon Kodesh. You have to give a din v'cheshbon. But think about the two words, din and cheshbon. What comes first? What does din mean? A verdict. A din. This is the judgment, this is the final verdict. What does cheshbon mean? Calculation, the accounting. What comes first? The cheshbon or the din? Of course the cheshbon, then the din. You do the accounting, just like when you're an accountant or you're doing an accounting of your own financial status or situation. You make the cheshbon. And then is the din, is the summation, is the final verdict, the result of the entire cheshbon. Why does the Mishnah say, Lifnei miyat ha'asid litain din, and then cheshbon? Now you would think, what's the big deal, cheshbon and din? But it's not. The expressions of the sages are very precise. They're very meticulous. They said din and cheshbon. They could have easily said, Lifnei miyat ha'asid litain cheshbon v'din, and it would have been very clear. So the Baal Shem Tov gave the following very, very powerful interpretation in life. It's quoted in Likutei Maharan by his great-grandson, Reb Nachman of Breslov, who was the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, and in his Sefer Likutei Maharan, he quotes this teaching from his grandfather, the Holy Baal Shem Tov. And the teaching is as follows. And really, as we will see, it's explicit, almost explicit in the Tanakh, as I think he points out over there, if I'm not mistaken. The Baal Shem Tov said that when a person lives, when we are alive, every day we have the opportunity to pass judgment on people. You're driving on the 59, right? Somebody comes from the left lane into the right lane. Yeah, you look out the window, you happen to know this yachna, and you pass judgment. If you don't know, certainly you can pass judgment. You're in the store, you pass judgment. I'm in the cleaners, wherever I am, you meet people. And I'm not talking about premeditated, conscious calculations and judgment. But, you know, the blink, there's a German expression, Spitzenfingergefühl. You know what that is? Spitzenfingergefühl. The feeling at the tip of your finger, we call it in English the sixth sense. It's almost instinctively we pass judgment. This one is this one is that, this one is this one is that. On ourselves, of course. That's the first person we don't stop passing judgment on, especially if you're Jewish. And of course on everybody else, your children, your spouse, never mind. And the tape, I wanted to say tape recorder, but I realize it's all of us shalom. The MP3, also all of us shalom. What's now? The cloud, the cyberspace, or the CD, it plays in the brain constantly. And old judgments, you know, old habits die hard, old judgments die hard. So the Baal Shem Tov said, why is life orchestrated this way? Because when a Jew comes to heaven, on the day of accounting, he or she is not judged. Rather, they are shown a life. They're shown a life of a completely different person, with different incidents and different stories and different experience. And they ask this Jew, why don't you judge this person? And every person gives a judgment. And then they say, that's the din. Now let's make a cheshbon. And the cheshbon shows that everything the person judged about the other person was really a judgment for themselves, because every incident in a different way played itself out in their own life. Which means when we walk around the world judging people, who are we judging? We're not judging other people. We're judging ourselves. Everything I see is mirrored in one way or another in my own life subtly. I don't always make the links and the connections, but it's a link. So my judgment of another person is essentially a judgment of me. That's why it doesn't say cheshbon v'din. First, you always make a din. You judge. And then they make a cheshbon that this din applies to you. That's why it says, Nifrayim in Adam midaitoi v'shaloi midaitoi. We exact payments from a person consciously and unconsciously. Consciously, because I'm the one who decides my fate. Unconsciously, I think I'm deciding your fate. Really, I'm deciding my fate. So it's conscious. I'm giving a very conscious judgment. But it's unconscious because I think I'm deciding you, where you're going. Really, I'm only deciding where I'm going. As they say, when I point one finger at you, at that very same moment, if you could see my fist, I am pointing 4 fingers at myself. Because whenever I point a finger, essentially, I'm highlighting where I am much more than where you are. When I judge somebody, it's not a judgment on you. It's much deeper judgment on me. What do I know about you? What do you know about me? Anybody knows anything about anybody else? How much do we know about other people? Even people themselves don't know much about themselves. How much are you self-aware? How much are you really self-aware? Sometimes it takes years to become self-aware, even in a minimal sense. So I barely know me. I know you now. I know a few external things and I put it into my box and my imagination. I know it's really a reflection of me, much more than it's a reflection on you. They say there was once a Jew who went to the Louvre Museum in Paris. And he went to one of the most expensive art galleries, the section of the Mona Lisa and other great pieces of art. And he considered himself a great connoisseur, a great art expert. And he's looking at these pieces of art with this, suspicious demeanor. So the museum curator comes over to him and says, Ma tevakish, what are you looking at? He says, I'm trying to see if these pieces of art are really as good as they make them out to be, and why some of them are worth $50 million, $100 million, $300 million, some of them are priceless. I'm trying to understand. The man looks at him and says, listen, let me tell you something. These pieces of art here are not on judgment at the moment. You are. So when I judge another person, I'm judging me. I'm judging myself. Where do you see this already in the Navi? David HaMelech has a whole story with Bathsheba. When it finishes, Nasan Hanavi, the prophet, comes to the king of the Jewish people. And in Judaism, nobody is above the law. It's one of the revolutions that Judaism introduced into the world. That nobody is above the law, which was a novel idea because there was always somebody who's above the law. The king, the demigod, the pharaoh, etc. In Yiddishkeit, nobody is above the law, and the prophet could speak truth to power. This was a revolutionary notion, it's good to acknowledge. Nasan Hanavi, the prophet of the time, comes to the king. And a king then wasn't what we call a king now, more ceremonial. You go to Denmark or England, it's more ceremonial. The king was the king. The king, the monarch, had absolute power, but nonetheless in Judaism, nobody ultimately is above the law. Not Moshe Rabbeinu and not David HaMelech. Everyone is indebted to God, to the moral conscience. And Nasan comes to David and he says, I want to tell you a story. You remember this story? There was a poor man who had 1 sheep. That's all he owned. And there was a wealthy man who needed to feed his guest. And what did he do? He went and he snatched away the sheep from this poor man to be able to slaughter it for his guest. This poor man had only one thing. He had 1 sheep. The wealthy man had everything. He had money and wealth and animals and livelihood and fields and assets. And yet when he needed the sheep, he went and he took it away from the poor man, and the poor man was left with nothing. What's the verdict? And David HaMelech was so furious at this rich man, he said, that's a death penalty. And Nasan Hanavi told him 2 words. Ata ha'ish. You're that man. You're that man. You see what happened? He could have said to him, why'd you do what you did? He didn't do that. He told him a story, a different story. And he had David decide who he is. And when David realized that, David said 1 word, Chatasi. I sinned. Chatasi Lashem, I sinned. Which was David's great moment, David's great credit. But why did Nassan have to do this way? He could have come into David and said, David, what you did was absolutely wrong and immoral. And David was at Chatasi, I said. He didn't do it that way. He had David define what he did. And the reason is, one is educational, and one has to do with the very core of human existence. There's no education like the education in which you help people answer their own questions. Great educators and teachers never answer questions. They help people find the answer to their questions within themselves, because those are the only real answers in life. Answers that somebody else gives you are never genuine answers. The real role of the greatest teachers, leaders, and mentors is never to give people answers. It's to help people find within themselves the answer to their question. Because the foundation of Judaism is that within every soul, you have the answer to your questions. Because your soul is divine, all I can do or somebody else can do is serve as a good tour guide to point out where to look, where not to look, how to get there. That's the meaning of the pasuk, Shma b'ni Musar avicha, v'al titosh Torah simecha in Mishlei and Proverbs. Listen, my son, to the rebuke of your father, and don't abandon the Torah of your mother. Why this change? Your father gives you Musar, your mother teaches you Torah. By your father it says, listen to his Musar. By your mother it says, don't abandon the Torah of your mother. Why not Shma b'ni Musar avicha, Musar imecha? Or Shma b'ni Torah avicha, v'Torah imecha? Or Shma b'ni Musar avicha, v'Torah imecha? Your mother doesn't teach you like your father teaches? In the young formative years, a mother communicates with a child far more than a father, often later years as well. What is this change? And the answer is, there's two different types of teachings. There's the teaching of Musar, and there's the teaching of Torah. One is from the father, one is from the mother. One is somebody teaching you things that you don't know and you need to know, and the other is teaching you that which you already know. And that's the difference between the father and the mother. Torah simecha, the Torah of your mother, is the Torah you learned in the womb of your mother. You don't have to hear it, you know it. All we say is, al titosh Torah simecha. Don't let go of that which you know in the womb. Because that's the real Torah, is the Torah that when you hear it, you already know deep down that you knew it already. And here is a principle in life. Whenever you hear Torah, how do you know it's authentic Torah? How do you distinguish between authentic Torah and Baba Maisis, not authentic Torah? Authentic Torah, you already knew. It resonates. It triggers the chords of your soul's violin that are sensitive. They detect the authenticity of it because it resonates deeply in you because you already learned it in the womb of your mother. V'al titosh Torah simecha. When something resonates, I know this is real because I know it already. The real teacher never teaches anything new. He brings out to actualization that which you know deep down in your heart, that which you know deep down in your soul. This doesn't mean it's not challenging, but it means it's not superimposed. It's internal. So therefore, how did I get into Musar imecha? I forgot. David HaMelech. Nassan doesn't want to tell David what he did. He wants David to tell David what he did. I don't want to tell you what you did. I want you to tell you what you did. That's a different type of communication. But there's something much deeper, and that is nobody judges any other person. Every person judges himself. And the reason is, and this is a fascinating idea, that nobody, even the greatest angels in the heavenly court, don't have the power to tell a Jew where to go. The only one who can tell you where to go is who? Yourself. So even the Rebbeinu Shalom, you come to heaven. He said, hey, you go here, you go there. No, nobody could tell you. Only you could tell you where to go. And the reason is because the human being is a reflection of infinity. And therefore, just as God is invincible, Ani Hashem lo shanisi, the chelek Eloka mimal, Nobody can control it. It is absolutely uninhibited and free. They can't even tell you to go you know where, even though they want to. The only one who could send you into purgatory or paradise is you yourself. It's true in that world. It's also true in this world. If you only recognize who you really are. And that's why David, Nasan Hanavi can't tell David. David has to tell David. But this is true with every person. So the way we react to other people is always a reflection of the way we're reacting to ourselves. When you treat yourself with compassion, you can treat others with compassion. When you're treating others with harshness, it looks like you're treating others with harshness. Trust me, you're much more miserable than anybody else. I treat you with harshness because that's my only language. It's my only language of communication to myself. I'm much more judgmental of me than I'm judgmental of any other person. Judgmental people are first and foremost miserable with themselves. You could see it. They may not show it, but deep inside they're living with so much toxicity, with so much poison. So of course when they relate to other people, this is the only language they know how to relate to. And therefore, it has to do with how I judge myself, and it has to do with how God judges me. These are the three great benefits of fulfilling the Hevei Don Es Kol Ha'adam L'Kafschus. To give people the benefit of the doubt, to treat them with compassion, to judge them meritoriously, rather than negatively when I have the choice, this way or this way. I once heard from the famous composer, Reb Shlomo Kalbach. He once shared that he was traveling to the Holy Land, and on the way, he stopped in Amsterdam for Shabbos. And he went to daven in the big shul in Amsterdam. And he was a great composer and a great musical talent. Many of you know a lot of his songs. He was a very, very talented person and he had his very spiritual soul. And he comes to shul, Shabbos morning. And he's in the back. He's a guest. So he takes a seat in the back and he starts davening. And suddenly he hears the cantor, the chazan, the shliach tzibur, the cantor, going over and starts davening loud. And he's very upset. First of all, the man is skipping words. Second, the man can't carry a tune. Third, the man has a horrible voice. So what's the first thought? He must be the man who pays the bills in the shul. And he loves hearing himself sing. There are such people. So he buys his way to the stender. He buys his ticket to become the cantor. And we all have to suffer. And he's already getting, and this is of course a given, and he's getting outraged how a shul is ready to sell its soul for money. Its God, its soul, its davening, just because somebody's a supporter and has a couple of dollars, dervas hademeya hadedeya, is not a reason to sell the whole davening experience to a person who simply can't do it. And he's so frustrated, he says, I'm not davening here. He goes to a nearby room, you know the shuls have smaller rooms, and he davens there himself. He doesn't want to be part of this corruption, of this politics, but he wants to hear the reading of the Torah. For that you need a minyan, he can't do it himself. So by Kriyas HaTorah, when they're about to read the Torah, he comes back to hear the Kriyas HaTorah. He comes back to shul, and they opened up the Aron Kodesh, the Ark, and they took out the Torah, and he gets online to kiss the Torah, and he sees the Chazan holding the Torah, walking to the bimah, but he's not walking himself. Two people are holding him up. Two people are holding up the Chazan, and he's holding the Sefer Torah, and he's walking to the bimah. So Shlomo turns to somebody near him and says, who is this cantor? Who is this Chazan? He says, you don't know who this Chazan is? This is the blind Chazan. He says, the blind Chazan, who is he? He says, the Chazan of Lodz. You never heard of the Chazan of Lodz? He says, who's the Chazan of Lodz? Lodz was, of course, one of the great and powerful and glorious Jewish communities in pre-war Poland. And Lodz had a great shul, the great shul of Lodz, and it had a great cantor and a beautiful choir as well. And he was the Chazan of Lodz, who had this choir of 40 children in pre-war Poland. He and all of his children were taken to Auschwitz. He was with those children until they were separated and they were sent to the gas chambers and to the crematoriums. he was allowed to live in order to entertain the SS who appreciated music and a good voice. But he suffered, he was tortured, and he was blind. He was blinded. And in the process, his vocal cords were also damaged. And for years, we asked him to daven. He says, I can't daven. I don't have the same voice. I haven't seen a prayer book in so many years. I can't daven. This Shabbos he agreed. This Shabbos he agreed to daven as a blind chazan, and he is the one who's holding the Torah. So Shlomo said, you can imagine how I felt. I was thinking to myself, this corrupt man who pays his way to get the stender. And really, the story was completely different. So he says, the man came by with a Sefer Torah, so he kissed the Sefer Torah, and then he kissed the person. So the man felt somebody kissed him. He said to somebody near him, who just kissed me? So the man said, Shlomo Kalbach. He said, Shlomo Kalbach, I love your music. He gave me back his soul. And he said he canceled his ticket to Israel to remain a few days with the Chazan of Lodz and hear the musical story of the choir and the Jewish community in Lodz before the Germans devastated it and destroyed it. There's a book I once read by Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he says that Sunday morning he was once on a train and everybody was very calm. You know, Sunday morning, people are less stressed. This one was reading the newspaper. This one was doing, what do they do, the puzzles? Crossword puzzles, yeah, one of the great involvements of people. And this one is reading a book, and this one is schmoozing with somebody. And there's a father with a bunch of kids who are absolutely rowdy and wild and aggressive. They're running all over the place. They're screaming, they're hollering, to the point that they're pulling people's newspapers away. They're tripping into people. They're falling into people. And he says, I was annoyed, and everybody was annoyed. We were really irritated. And when it kept on happening again and again, I finally took the courage. I turned to the father respectfully. And I say, you know, people are here. They're relaxing. They're reading. Don't you think it would be appropriate for you to tame in your kids, to control your kids, because they're really behaving inappropriately? And he said it very nicely and respectfully, but he said the facts. And the father, who was like in a daze, looked up and he said, you know, you're quite right. You're quite right. I think they're out of it. I'm also out of it. Their mother just died an hour ago. We're all coming back from the hospital. She just died, and they probably don't know what to do with themselves and their emotions, just like I don't know what to do with myself and my emotions. And he says, at that moment, all I could feel is shame. Shame because the facts didn't change. They were still schlepping away people's newspapers and irritating the living daylights out of everybody. But the story was a completely different story. Instead of being irritated, now I was just full of inner shame, but also full of compassion. And I asked, is there anything I can do for you? This is what we call paradigm shifts. I once went into a bagel shop, and the Jew who was giving me a bagel or whatever, the salad, I don't want to say I ordered a bagel, I ordered salad. I don't want you to stop coming. But it was a bagel shop. So we were schmoozing. I was waiting there for the order, so we were schmoozing. He's a Yid from Yerushalayim. And Jerusalem Jews are very special. They have a certain character to them that other Jews don't have. It's very interesting. Yerushalayim Yidden, they're just like of a different, Jerusalemites. They're made of a different fabric. Something in the DNA is a little different. Both in terms of cynicism, in terms of humor, in terms of their perspective. Interesting people. So he tells me, he says, I want to tell you something. His mother died from a stroke suddenly, and she had 11 children. She was a young lady. She died Erev Sukkos. Erev Sukkos. They sat Shiva for a few minutes after the burial, and that was it. Shiva is over. Yom Tov is mafsik the Shiva, it's over. There are whole sukkahs together, 11 kids with a widower in Yerushalayim. And Isru Chag Sukkos, 2 days, 1 day after Yom Tif, day after Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, in Israel it's 1 day, they're going to the cemetery. They have a minhag to do a Kamas Matzeva after the Shiva, to put up the Matzeva fast. They're going to the cemetery to put up the Matzeva of their mother. 11 kids, little kids, with a father. They didn't own a car. They took a bus. So they're standing at one of the Egged bus stops, a father with 11 children, Isru Chag Sukkos. Yerushalayim Yid is walking by, slowly. He's walking, probably goes to the Kais on the way to the Kaisel or on the way somewhere else. One of these old Jerusalem Jews who's doing this for many years, he walks by, and in Yiddish, I say it in Yiddish because he told this to me in Yiddish, and then I'll translate. He says, Kinderlach, nicht genug gepattert Zeit a ganz Chol HaMoyed, man darf sich weitergehen verweilen. Kids, not enough trips, a whole Chol HaMoyed Sukkos. Now you're still going to waste your time and go on more trips and schlep your father. Zeit zu gehen in yeshiva, man darf gehen in yeshiva, time to go back to school. And he walks on, he moves on, he moves on. And this boy, who was a young boy at the time, I think he was 11, he told me, I think he was 11 or 10 at the time. He said he just realized, and he made a decision that moment, that before he knows, he will never open his mouth. And I told him, I give you credit. Most people would make a decision that moment that the world is an evil place. Most people would make a decision that moment that nobody can be trusted. But you, instead of internalizing his message and allowing it to traumatize you, you actually turned his message into a springboard for extraordinary growth. You said, I know what it feels like, and therefore I will not do it to somebody else. Which is essentially a paradigm shift in the way a person deals with negative experiences that happen to you. 17 times does the Torah say, you should love v'ahavtem es hager. You should love the foreigner, the refugee, the person who's not from here, the person who came from another country, from another place. The ger, the convert, literally the convert, or the convert as the refugee, the foreigner. Why? Ki gerim hayisem be'eretz Mitzrayim. Because you were foreigners in Egypt. What's the connection? The connection is you know what it feels like to be mistreated because you're a minority, because you're different, because you don't fit into the clique. So what was God telling the Jewish people? There's two ways how you could respond to your own pain that you had in Egypt. One is, you were abused, you abuse others. You were afflicted, you afflict others. Those who were hurt sometimes hurt others, because this is the language they know. But what I want you to do is something else. Make a conscious decision to say to yourself, I was hurt, and therefore I know what people need so much more than other people, and I will make sure to use this experience to know how to treat a foreigner, a convert, a ger appropriately. A whole different perspective. And this is what I told them. I said, this is what I see in you. It's fascinating. And that you were 11 years old and you can internalize it that way. Sometimes people need 20 years of therapy for this. As an 11-year-old, you said, wow, I know what not to do. That's an extraordinary moment. So this is all included in those words of the sages. Have a dones kala adam lekav schus. We really don't know. For you, making a Sheva Brachas is a different experience than for your sister making a Sheva Brachas. It's in small things and it's in big things. It's seeing people on a bus, kids on the bus stop after Isru Chag when life is supposed to become not fun again. And they're having fun for the rest of their life because they just buried their mother. Or on a subway, or a chazan and shul. You never know, you never know. I once saw in shul somebody taking out an iPhone in the middle of Chazaras Hashatz, and I got very irritated. In my mind, I got very irritated. A few weeks later, it was my wife's due date. So I told her I'm going to shul to daven. So she said, leave your cell phone on and check every 2 minutes to see if I didn't send a text that we have to go to the hospital. So middle of Chazaras Hashatz, I took out the phone, and I said, whoops, interesting. He's probably looking at me and thinking the same thing. This doesn't justify people's wrong behavior. What it means is, when I look at somebody, I have the choice of how to tell the story. And when I tell the story in a positive way, I'm not being naive. I'm actually being much more realistic. Because if I want him to change, by telling the story in a positive way, I will be more effective. So you think by being positive, you're being naive. By being negative, you're being realistic. It's the other way around. First of all, being negative, you're becoming a bitter, frustrated person, and everybody will see it, especially your kids. And grandkids will not want to be around you. Second of all, you'll repair it. Third of all, that's how we're judged, the way we judge others. There's a story in Maseches Shabbos. The Talmud says, the Gemara says in Tractate Shabbos, page 127b. Taf Kuf Chav Zayin Amid Beis. It's two stories, quite extraordinary stories, but they tell us how our sages viewed this phenomenon in human relations. And I'm going to open the story. Talmud tells the following story. There was a person who needed parnasa. He lived in Galil Ha'elyon. He lived in the upper Galilee of the Holy Land, right, up north. And he went down to Durham. He went down to the south, and he employed himself at a balabas, at somebody who owned a lot of property. For 3 years, he needed to support his family. Erev Yom Kippur, he turns to his boss, his employer, and he says, "Ten li schari ve'elich va'azun es ishti ubanai." Give me my wages for 3 years of work so I can go feed and nurture my wife and my children. This is what life was like. Omaloi, the man said, it's going to sound familiar to some of you, Ein li mayas. I don't have money. So he said, okay, give me fruits. He said, Ainli, I don't have fruits. He said, okay, tenli karka. Give me some real estate. Give me land. He says, Ainli. He says, okay, tenli behema. Give me some animals. Ainli, I don't have. Tenli karim v'kastas. Give me blankets and pillows. Ainli, I don't have. So the man took his little turban, his little pekala, v'holach lebeise bepache nefesh. And he went home, bepache nefesh, broken, despondent. Okay. La'achar regel, Yom Kippur passes, Sukkot passes, the man is home. After Sukkot, the Baal Habayis, the employer, takes the money that he owed this man, together with 3 donkeys that are fully laden. One donkey was loaded with food, another donkey was loaded with drinks, and another donkey was loaded with delicacies. Delicacies then did not mean chocolate mousse cake, didn't exist, or cheesecake. Delicacies meant probably scorched barley kernels, right? Something like that. Or pears, oranges. Okay. He comes to his house and he delivers all these goods. Wow. The man is eating, his wife is eating, the kids are eating. So given a Yom Tov and Shtetl, they taka had a second Sukkot. He finishes the meal with all of them. All the food of the donkey is going to last them a year. He takes out all the money he owes him, and he gives him the money. Then he looks at his employee, and he says, now I want to ask you a question. When you told me, give me my fee, my wages, and I said I don't have money, b'mecha shadetoni, with what did you suspect me? When I said I don't have no money, what was your thought? And the employee says, I thought, Shema prakmatya bezel nizdamnalach, b'lakachta behen. Perhaps you found an unbelievable opportunity to buy merchandise for cheap, so you spent all your money, all your liquid money you spent, and then you didn't have. When you told me, give me your animals, and I said I don't have, what did you think? I said, perhaps you rented out all your animals to other people you don't have. When you said to me, give me real estate, I thought to myself, maybe it's also leased to other people and you don't have any real estate. When you said to me, give me fruits, and I said I don't have, I said to myself, perhaps you didn't give yet meiser, you didn't tithe, and therefore it's not usable yet. When I asked you for pillows and blankets And you said you don't have? I said I don't have. What did you think? I said, maybe this person consecrated all that he owns to the Beis HaMikdash, to heaven, and therefore he can't give me anything. So even though there's blankets and pillows, it belongs to the Beis HaMikdash, and he can't give it. It's Me'ilah. He would be stealing. Oh, my Lord. The employer said, Ha'avoida, I swear to you, Kachaya. This is what happened. I happened to designate and pledge, I made a neder, to give all my properties, b'shvil hurkanas b'ni shalayasik b'tayra, to give away all my property, like you said, because of my son, my ear Hurkanus, who was not learning. And when I came to my friends, he tiduli kol nedorai. They then annulled all my vows, which was based on a mistake, and they obliterated it. Va'ata keshem shedantani l'schus hamokim yadinoi l'schus. You judged me favorably, God should judge you favorably as well. It's interesting. There's a sefer called She'iltois de Reb Achoi Gon, one of the Goyim, the name was Reb Achoi, and there he tells the story and he identifies the name of the employer. The name of the employer was Rabbi Akiva. He is the employer. But then the employer was the father of Hyrcanus. The employee, the one who judged him meritoriously, was Rabbi Akiva. If it's not enough, the Gemara says, Maisa b'chasid echad. It's a little bit of an uncomfortable story, but the Gemara wants us to know it. Shabbos 127. Maisa b'chasid echad. There was a pious Jew who liberated a young Jewish girl who was taken for ransom. She was abducted, and he paid the money and he liberated her. They were in a hotel, and she needed a place, so he put this girl by him in the room. The next day, the Gemara says, he went to the mikveh. After that, he gave a shiur to his students. By the shiur, he says, when I took this girl into my room, what were you guys thinking? So they said, we were thinking that perhaps he didn't want her to be with any of the students. When I went to the mikveh, what did you think? They said, we thought that because of the traveling journey, you had to carry, you emitted seed, and you had to go to the mikveh. So he said, Ha'avoide kachaya, I swear to you, this is what happened. Va'atem keshem shedantuni lekavschus hamokim yadin eschem lekavschus. You judge me favorably, God should judge me favorably. God will judge you favorably. Now you may ask, these two people were innocent. But a lot of people you know are not innocent. These two were innocent. The question is, you could say they're lying, you could say they're saying the truth. Say they're saying the truth. But what happens if I know that's not the case? So we have to summarize this and understand what this means. It means three things, practically. Number one, when I look at a person's behavior, or I hear something they say, I could think about it in two ways. I can give them the benefit of the doubt and say, they are completely doing what they think is right. They don't realize they're doing wrong. They don't realize they're making a mistake. From their perspective, they're doing a righteous thing, even though I may know better, but I give you the benefit of the doubt. The chazan was not skipping davening because all he cared about money. And the children and the father was not being irresponsible. He was dealing with a devastating crisis. So before I know, I could be quiet. That's the first thing. The first thing is, you don't know. But sometimes you could see that it's wrong. You could see somebody's doing something wrong. Sometimes they're not doing anything wrong. You could interpret it that they're doing something wrong. Give it a positive interpretation. But sometimes I see the person is saying something obnoxious or doing the wrong thing. But still, I could say they may not realize the effect or the impact. Sometimes people don't see things. Not everybody was gifted with the highest level of wisdom and enlightenment. Sometimes people say stupid things. Yeah, I sometimes sit, Rahman al-Lisan, at a Shiva house. People come in. They say the stupidest things that humanity has ever invented. I could judge them. They came to bother the Aval. No, the Aval is annoyed. But they actually mean well. In their own limitations, they mean well. They don't know about the experience. They don't know the person. They don't know what the person is going through. And they're trying to comfort him in their own way. All the wise comments that people make. At least he's in a good place. You must be relieved. Yeah, very relieved. I also had a difficult week last week, don't worry. Whatever, all these types of things. They may be saying the wrong thing, but they actually are doing it in innocence. Some people are not always aware of everything. But then there you can also give the benefit of the doubt. Attribute it to ignorance, not to maliciousness. But sometimes a person does something, and it's very hard to attribute it to ignorance because they're doing it and it seems like they know what they're doing. Here it becomes much harder, but it's also important to be done l'kafschus. And the way to do it is, what I mentioned last week from the Sfas Emes, have they done es kol ha'adam l'kafschus. Whenever you judge a person, you have to judge the entire person. Sometimes, if a person went through certain experiences, this is the only way they know how to handle life. It could be this guy has a miserable, miserable marriage. That's how he carries himself. It could be this guy lost his job. Could be this man is an angry, frustrated person. Could be this man has been so hurt, he's cynical. It doesn't justify the behavior. What it does is it allows me to approach this person from a much calmer, more respectful place. Like we spoke about, Vira'ohu HaKayin. Don't only look at the disease. Look at the person. Put it in context. It doesn't justify it. But it allows you to see, do you know his upbringing? Do you know what she went through? Doesn't justify it. They're accountable. But if I actually want to help the situation by putting it in context of an entire life, I could see it in a different way and say, yeah, they may be doing it wrong, doing something wrong. They may even know it's wrong. These are maybe the only tools they have. Do I know about their temper, their anger, their depression, their issues, their struggles, their challenges? I don't know. Maybe I know a little bit. Have they done es kol ha'adam? And then you could say, you know what? I don't think this should be done, but I can't sit in the throne of judgment until I reach your space. And as the Sfas Emes says, and you never reach their space. The Ksav Sofer was the son of the Chassam Sofer, Reb Moshe Sofer, and he succeeded his father as the chief Rav of Pressburg. Pressburg was the part of the Austria-Hungarian Empire. It was one of the 4 empires that was dissolved with the First World War. Today, Pressburg is named Bratislava. And when the Chassam Sofer passed away, approximately 1840, he was succeeded by his son, the Ksav Sofer. And they tell a story that the day that they coronated the Ksav Sofer as the official Rav of Pressburg, there was a Suda, there was a feast in a hall or a shul, wherever it was, in a hall in Pressburg. And the Ksav Sofer says, I want to share a treat with everybody. Ksav Sofer had an antique. It was a coin from the times of the second Beis HaMikdash. Some of you may have seen such things they have in the Israeli Museum, like shekels, machzos shekels, or different currencies, coins from that era. And it's obviously uniquely precious in terms of Jewish history and the history of Eretz Yisrael and the Beis HaMikdash, etc. And the Ksav Sofer had such a coin from Bayis Sheni. And he took out the coin, and for the day of his simcha, he passed around the coin for people to be able to see it. And they passed it around, and it never came back. It never came back. You pass around the picture, a priceless picture, it never came back. And the Ksav Sofer sees this, Hayela Deinenu, and what happens? He asks them to lock the door, so nobody should go out and nobody should go in. And he says, please, whoever has it, just give it back now. And if not, I'm going to ask everybody to empty out all of their pockets. There was an old Jew who was older than the Ksav Sofer, who was still a contemporary of his father, the Chassam Sofer. And he says, Rebbe, let's search for the coin for another 15 minutes. Before we empty out everybody's pockets, let's search. This was a little strange that he's asking. But for his honor, he was older. He said, fine. They search another 15 minutes. Hayela deinenu, hashekel einenu. The money is gone. Chav Sofer says, okay, now I think everybody should empty out all their pockets or just give back the coin. And the old man says, Rebbe, another 15 minutes. Let's search for it. Okay, it's another 15 minutes. A third time after 15 minutes, Chav Sofer says, no. And the Jew says, one more set of 15 minutes. Maybe we could still find it. At this point, everybody was very annoyed because what does this mean? It sounds like basically he's looking for an excuse of delaying the situation. And maybe he's going to go out through the sewer system, through the chimney. What's the problem? If you're not a thief, what do you care if people empty out their pockets? What's the big deal? You'll empty out your pockets. But he was a chashuv yid. He was a prominent person. He was an older person. He was a sage. So the Chav Sofer said, fine. And what happened? Now, after searching for 45 minutes, 3 times 15 minutes, they found a coin. What happened was it was a meal, and it fell into somebody's plate, and the waiter was cleaning up the plates, and it was on one of those wagons that they're leading the plates. They found the coin in the garbage in the room. And the Chav Sofer was very, very overjoyed. Finally, they had the coin. He turns to this Jew, and he said, why did you want us to search for another 15 minutes? And the Jew takes out a coin. He said, I also have a coin from Bayesheni. And I hold it with me. I hold it with me. If everybody would have emptied out the pockets, I would have emptied out my pocket. You would have seen the coin. It would have been obvious by everybody that I stole it. So I wanted you should search. So the Chav Sofer turned to the crowd and he said, what's the lesson of the story? And he said, I'll tell you the lesson of the story. Let's say I would have not listened to him, which I did not want to. And he would have emptied out his pocket. And he would have had a coin of Bayesheni. And he would have said, I'm not the ganav, I'm not the thief. Would there be anybody in this room who would have believed him? Nobody. They would say he's an old, filthy, dirty liar. That's what he is. Using such a precious moment for his own benefits. And his reputation would go down as a filthy, deceptive old man. And the truth is, we would all have been wrong. And nobody would have ever known it. Only he would know it, and God would know it. So Sofer says, that's the lesson of the story. Thank God it didn't come to that, but it could have come to that. And who would have imagined? Because that's the truth of life. The truth of life is, I know nothing about anybody until they don't tell it to me. And even when they tell it to me, I know very little. I know the part that they're saying, and I know the part that they know about themselves. And therefore, the brighter you are, the deeper you are, the more humble you are. It's not people who are brighter and deeper, you can't deceive them, so they judge people. People who are really wise and bright and deep don't judge people. Because when you're superficial, you judge. When you're deep, you never judge. Because you understand the complexities of every life. You understand how difficult it is even to live. First of all, you know that you don't know. Second of all, even if you know, you still know the person could really mean well. Third of all, even if they don't mean well, you know how trapped so many people are. And when you know how trapped so many people are, you don't justify wrong behavior ever. But you could develop a sense of compassion, a sense of sensitivity, a sense of empathy for people's experience. And when you come from that place, you can actually reverse so many processes and help people open up to be able to live a far richer and greater life. Thank you. Have a wonderful week. You're welcome. You're welcome.
I 100% believe that every single person in this room has a totally different experience and is internalizing everything.
Yes, everything. Everything. Including which relatives have to hear it.
Right, exactly. Right? And exactly what's going on in your life at that particular moment.
Right.
Jacobson said this year Sunday night.
Oh, wow.
Everybody was
Thank you.
beyond.
Thank you.
This is from the family.
Oh,
This
thank
is
you.
The magnets. I don't know if you
Oh,
remember
his
the
magazines.
magnets.
His
The
music.
magnets.
Yeah.
No, this is a magnet.
Ah,
He
yeah.
sent emails about how he
Thank
came
you.
up with the
Thank
idea.
you. Thank you.
So the family
Wonderful.
We all
Thank
just
you.
appreciate so much
Thank
the
you.
connection with Yosef, because that was the name that was added to
I
it.
know. I know.
He did-
I knew.
Okay. It was
And the
wonderful.
music and everything.
Yeah.
You're a relative?
I'm a close friend of the Horowitz family. Heinz's wife.
Yeah. Tal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the feedback.
you.
They had a beautiful oilam.
It wasn't as big as it's been in the past, but everybody said that it was the best in all
Okay.
the years.
Thank you.
You captured it.
Thank you.
And I just had one other question. My husband is starting to learn with somebody, Tanya. He has the English Hebrew Sefer, but he wanted to know if there was another English book that could capture before he goes to.
Rabbi Steinsaltz has a whole set in Hebrew and in English.
But will that help him with because he has an English Hebrew?
No, but that's more, it goes in more explanations.
Okay.
What's your name?
Tilson, Bela Tilson.